In this lesson, we'll take a look at editing our UVs. So let's start with just a couple of simple shapes here so that we can kind of see how this works. So we've got this cube. Let's go ahead and select the polygons there, and you can see we've got those mapped separately here in the UV image editor. And so what we want to do now is select those and have that reflected in both sides here. So you can see I've got all these selected, but I can also select different UV components over here, and it's not selected over there. So this does give us the ability to select different types of components, but if we want to have this synchronized, all we have to do is hit this little button right down here, and that will allow any selection that we do in either side to be reflected over on the other side. So that can be useful. Keep in mind though that in this case, I now no longer have the ability to select individual islands. So I can select faces or edges, but I can't select the individual islands like that with that button. So it's up to you whether you want to turn that on or off, but let's go ahead and turn that off. And now take a look at what we can do to kind of manipulate our UVs over here. So let me kind of pull this over. So we can select a face, and then all we have to do to move it is hit G, grab that, move it around, just like we would any other object. We can hit R to rotate it. Control will allow us to snap that to particular angles. We can also hit S to scale this up or down, and it works for islands as well. Now what happens if we want to start to assemble these UVs? So we looked at doing automatic, sort of this automatic unwrapping and mapping, but there's still a lot of work to be done after that. So you have to take some of the pieces that you've created and connect those up with other pieces to get the optimal layout. Okay, you're not going to get it just automatically first time. So let's take a look at how we can start to connect things up. So all we have to do is come in. Let's say we want to use this as our base. I'll just click on this top edge, hit V on the keyboard. V is in vehicle, and you can see that we get a preview of where that attached face will go and which face it's going to be. And so in this case, this green line corresponds to this green line. So if I click here with the left mouse button, it's going to attach that. Let's go do the one on top. Hit V again, and you can see now it's this one. So we'll just click that one. Let's do the same thing down here. Hit V and attach. And so we can start to create that same kind of layout that we got, that sort of optimal layout, by doing it manually. So now we would come in here on the side, hit V, attach that one, V and attach. Now we select our island. We can hit S to scale this down, G and to move it into the correct position on our UV layout. And again, this is representing the texture. So now we have an individual island here, and if I select one of these faces and try to move it, you can see it's actually attached, which is what we want. Now in some cases there will be UV islands that have parts that are attached that you don't want to be attached. So for instance, if I wanted there to be a seam right here, all I'd have to do is have that polygon or group of polygons selected, and before I move it, I'll hit Y, and then go back in and select it, hit G, and move it across. Let me try that again. Split that, hit G, and there you can move it across. And so now I can kind of separate that out. And you can always go back in and reattach it if you need to. So go back in, hit V, attach that, stitch it back together. So that's how you can kind of cut things apart and stitch them back together. Now we can also, if we come in here and let me select this guy. And so you can see here the UVs that we have currently. So we could go in and we could start to select different islands. And if you go into the UVs menu, there's lots of different things that you can do here. One of them is minimize stretch, or Control V. So if we hit that, we can use our scroll wheel to define how much that is as working. And really what it's doing is it's trying to minimize the amount of distortion. Hit left mouse button to complete that. Okay, we can also come in here and select all of these, and we can pack the islands. So it'll kind of take all the islands that we have and pack them together into this space. Then if we wanted to give ourselves a little bit more space, we can hit S to kind of scale this down. Or you can manually come in now and move these different parts into different areas if you want to give them a little bit more room and have a little bit more customization over where those go. And again, you can select that and Control V, and then you can kind of smooth that out a little bit. So that's kind of what your end result you want to look like. You want all the pieces sort of laid out. You don't want to have anything overlapping. You can see how there's a little bit of space between there. There's also a bit of space between the UVs and the outer border here, so you want to make sure to have that. But how you actually lay those out is really up to you. You just want to maximize the space that you have, because any open space here is wasted in the texture because it's not being applied to anything. And so you want to kind of get that balance between distortion and the number of islands, and how much space that you're using. And you also want to have, if you're using textures, then you want to have probably similar scales, so the resolutions are matching and things like that. So a lot of things to juggle and keep in mind as you're doing your UVs, but that's kind of a quick look at editing the UVs, moving them around and then stitching and cutting them apart. So the next thing that we'll look at is using multiple projections to lay out a mesh. So go ahead and do that next.